So hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. We are Adrian Byrne and Richie Ford, and TKD Coach Academy is our effort to shine a light on the very best of ITF competition, sparring, training, performance and coaching. And every Friday we release a video that allows you to join us in a bit of a conversation about some topic that has either been suggested to us or that we've decided to dig into. But this Friday is a little bit different. So Richie, do you want to explain what we're doing for this Fight Chat Friday?
Yeah, so coming towards the end of the year, obviously it's been a bit of a strange year, but in that we started off our first series here on YouTube. So in that way it's been good for us. So yeah, we decided to maybe coming towards the end of the year to bring some of the really good takeaways that we had throughout the year together. Almost kind of like a run through back of 2020, so the best bits kind of an episode. So hopefully there'll be real valuable takeaways here as well. Just a couple of reminders for some people, and it should be a nice list of good, solid takeaways and principles for ITF sparring. So I think it should be good.
Yeah, and on that note, it will be our last episode for 2020, and we will be back at it in the new year. But for the last episode for 2020, it also, I suppose, by complete and utter accident, worked out that we ended up with 20 takeaways from the various episodes. So that wasn't planned. That was just the way that we landed on it. So, yeah, I think we'll just jump right into it, and we're going to go way, way, way back to episode 1, and let's see what that had for us.
Yeah, of course, straight off the bat, great production value there.
You see, it's the same thing.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's the same idea. It's whoever makes that initial attack has a massive advantage, just based on this ring size alone. By initiating, you already have a massive advantage because there's only maybe like 1 or 2 mats max that they can actually go back further, which is not a lot of space for big guys at 85 kilos, you know. It's not.
And even there, where Danilo's initiated with a blitz and Alamin's gone with the defensive side kick, by the time he's got his feet back under him, he's out of the ring.
Exactly. So like judges probably won't score that anyway, because I'd imagine, I didn't look at it, but I'd imagine his standing leg was probably out of the ring.
That's another. So the first thing that jumps back at me is, oh wow, yeah, well, I suppose we did just get started, didn't we? And it was a case of jumping in with both feet and the technology that we had and just trying to make it work. But there was still a kind of key takeaway or point that we wanted to make out of that one, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So when you look at the production value now, and yeah, props to you, Adrian, you did great work there on that. We're looking much better now, I think. So the production value has improved a lot, and the sound and things like that. So hopefully that makes a big difference. But yeah, again, like it was all about the principles that we're trying to learn and to help shine a light on things that people can take away from valuable contests in the high level of ITF. And there was one of the important ones of knowing your spacing and knowing your having that ring awareness, and that's a solid principle to have throughout, no matter where you're fighting, who you're fighting. It doesn't matter. It's a very solid thing to be aware of, and just have that awareness and recognition of your spacing and your distance, ring size, etc. is massive.
For sure. So we took a little jump there, and we end up in episode 3, where we were looking at the power of warnings and shot selection. So
Lindsay's a little bit more patient now. Maybe she's showing her experience here, and she's kind of squeezing slowly and patiently towards the corner. Now, as you said earlier, she's using combinations to set up that straight line backward motion, and scores a lovely clean front hand, but more importantly gets the reward on with a warning. And that warning is actually very important because it's a third warning for Adelina, and that's actually more valuable than that lovely front hand,
because she got it.
Yeah, exactly. And I had a look at the scoreboard, and there was only 2 judges scored Lindsay's front hand.
Yeah.
But then 4 judges obviously reward her because of the third warning.
Yeah.
So like it just shows you as well how valuable warnings are. You know what I mean?
Scoreboard here, I think. There you go. So you can see the sudden drop, and it's back to a 1-point game. 1 point for Lindsay brings this back to a draw at this stage.
So she got 1 point off 2 judges for the front hand.
Yeah.
And then she got 1 point off all judges for the warning. So that warning is actually so valuable, like, you know.
Yeah, but I think even if you go back to the movements that she's chosen, I think it's very well chosen, because the risk is on that first shot, the blindside turning kick, where, you know, she knows Adelina likes to slip out. If she slips out, okay, Adelina's walking into that turning kick. But the risk is that you just get caught with a punch. Someone comes straight through it. But having thrown that, she's going directly into a back kick. There isn't a nice counter. If you're moving backwards at all, the back kick, you've only got to give more space, because picking the right shot on the right side or stepping over it, you have to be going from a better balanced position. And Adelina's on 1 foot. She's not balanced. So all she can do is make space for this back kick. And, you know, it's enough. Her back foot's already out of the ring. Her options are limited. She's giving away that warning right away, as you said. And so the hands are just gravy. So yeah, I'm kind of cringing a little bit. I remember that episode was the one that made us decide, right, this going live from Zoom is definitely not the way to go. We can't record over Zoom. We can't share it this way. So that forced us to change. So thanks for the feedback on that one, folks. It really helped us to move on.
And definitely a shout out to TKD Techers as well. They provided us with lots of videos for the last couple of episodes.
Thank you, Master De Silva.
Yeah, so some great content there that is very valuable for us to look at. But yeah, like, again, very, very common principle that we've looked at there is the warnings, the power of warnings. And we'll probably see it down the line again in another clip. But yeah, the point you made there on shot selection as well was very, very valid, because being able to choose the correct shots that don't leave your opponent back into that space is very, very important. And that's, again, something that's very, very valuable.
Yeah, definitely. And that theme of the relative value of scores just does keep coming up. The more chats we go into, the more often that one comes up. So we skipped on a couple of episodes here as well, and we have a little bit of a clip around adapting and knowing your distance.
Being able to adapt in the fight with such short rounds that we have, it's very, very difficult if you're not good at it. Being able in 2 minutes, being able to adapt is something that's actually quite difficult, because it's easy for us to slow it down here and take a look and have a couple of views, but when you're in the moment, it just happens so quick, and being able to adapt in the moment is a very, very important skill.
That's it. And I mean, some of that comes from experience. There's another lovely, I think, slow-mo capturing it. You can see like really where what Riley's having to adapt to in this case, and deal with. And I mean, we know from that particular time, the New Zealand guys were telling us, like, you know, we haven't had to fight this at home. You know, this is something that we've been dealing with in Europe for a year or 2 years at that stage, that the guys from New Zealand really hadn't had to deal with to a huge extent. Maybe in the World Cup the previous year. But, it's a little bit newer, and you can see the distance, I think, that's been covered here. Like, Colin hasn't had to move his front foot yet. The front foot is still parked. And, you know, and for his stand, he's not a full extension there. So he's been able to control that distance. Riley is bounced into the distance and being caught. And it means then that, you know, even though the reaction is there, it's late, you know. And that then was the Blitz and Colin Carroll. We ended up with a couple of videos of Colin that demonstrating that and those rhythms. But the control of the distance and the rhythm and how those link together was a point that I think came up a couple of times again.
Yeah, so like throughout all these episodes, we came across the importance of controlling distance, tempo, and spacing. And I think that we'll probably see these come up a lot in most of our takeaways here. But distance is massive. It's the difference between hitting and not getting hit.
Yeah.
And just that point you made of Riley there having the correct exit strategy or the correct shot, but it's just distance made the timing wrong then as well. So like the distance really is a foundational thing that sets the tone for everything else.
Yeah, and again, what we like to bring it back to always is principles. So techniques and individual tactics, they can adapt and change, and you can learn a tactic for a given situation, but when you have principles that underlie it, they'll keep coming up and keep being valuable, and the principles will adapt to the situation. And one of the ones that you've had repeatedly is the advantage of being on top, being the kicker on top. And I think that applies also when it comes to hands, and I think that's where our next clip takes us. So let's have a look. These are the kind of exchanges that he's getting the value from. Like, he's getting scores out of these exchanges where what's happening is he's staying taller. The punches are happening, and between both fighters. But Zach is staying that little bit taller. His punches tend to be more towards the head, and where Fatty's hands are hitting into the chest and into the body a little bit more. And you'd have to imagine that from a referee's point of view, scoring these punches, they're going to just see the ones where you're seeing that red glove on that blue helmet, and it's clearer than the blue glove hitting into the body. And and I think there's been a couple of exchanges like that throughout the fight where if you're scoring it might come out 2-1 Zach.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. It comes back to Zach being just so tall, and he's actually not a tall guy. He's maybe like 5'11", 6 foot max, I think.
Yeah, but, calling him out there.
But he's well able to get really tall, even against when he's fighting guys in the plus 85 division, and they're much taller than him, 6'2", 6'3". He's still able to get really tall there and get those punches so clear, and it's one of certainly one of his trademark kind of techniques, I guess, if you want to call it that. But his body position is so tall and upright that he's able to get the punches so clear. Yeah,
and I do wonder if it's something, because I've often said this about Zach. Zach comes out of his fights and coming through 4 and 5 rounds in a tournament. He's still way too pretty by the end of that. Like, fighting all those big guys, he should be getting some lumps in the face, and he tends to come out looking like he did when he went in. And you are getting hit. And so unless he's got some special genetic, like adamantium skin or something like that, I think it's just more likely that he is putting himself in that position where he's a little taller, a bit more accurate. He's staying over the punches. The punches are hitting the chin and down. Or, I think you can see it here against Fatty, who's well able to bring the hands to bear, but he's not getting as many accurate punches on the chin, in and around the eyes that, you would expect to see. And coming out of that, Zach's coming out of the match a little less bashed up, I think a little bit of fanboying there going on my behalf. I don't know.
Big fan of Zach, yeah. But again, we see the second version, I guess, of the production, and it's just kind of progressing bit by bit. So that's cool to look back on, and in just even such a short time, so that's cool. But that principle, again, super important, and it's something that I've been kind of looking at ever since that, really. And you can notice now the guys who are able to land those very clear and obvious punches, and generally they do really, really well in ITF, and it's rewarded by judges. So being able to throw punches and to be able to land them and get the scores, there's a difference there, and certainly a bit of a skill to it. And Zach showed how it's done.
Yeah, and the work rate of it as well. I mean, it's they track it very much in boxing, is how many punches actually land, how many thrown versus how many connect, and I think Zach's return there is better than most in terms of how many punches actually land compared to how many he throws. But
I think actually as well that the fact that he's like a shorter stance helps it a little bit, because it's more hands dominant really than kicking. But like, his kicking is very, very good. He's got that solid axe kick, turning kicks, things like that. But you won't really see him throw too many side kicks that often. So that's one of the things with that stance. But then your punching becomes really, really solid.
Yeah. So then going from that, we went to getting the front leg going. And so this is coming from our 9th episode. So we're kind of finding our feet, I think, at this stage.
And that's something that, like, a lot time when you're the smaller, you'll hear people say, put them around and do lots of moving and draw them out. But I think that's something that's people don't really put much interest in, of using your own front leg still, and it's something that Axel does really well here, that you can't really give up your own front leg because it stops any momentum, and it also keeps the other side and the bigger guy honest, in terms of it keeps him busy and has something to worry about. So I would definitely, if I was the smaller guy, I would stick with that plan of using my own front leg where I could, and threaten with the hip. I think the hip is a nice place to go with that if you're the shorter guy. But then you got to be careful then as well not to stay on that line too long, because that's where Andre wants to fight. He's not really looking to be chasing angles and following up really too much here. So if you can draw that out by mixing up that front leg side kick, being the shorter guy, and pulling some angles like we kind of see here, a little bit of footwork and things like that, that's the trick, I guess. Like for me, when I was in particular like team sparring, if I ever had to fight a shorter guy, you're very conscious of being drawn out, and over committing and being easily countered because of the speed difference, I guess. So it's something you got to be aware of, certainly. And I'd like to see Andre kind of having maybe a tighter guard with his hands and just maybe committing a little bit more with the legs and squeezing that space. I think warnings could have been a big thing there for Andre that he didn't really use in his favor. And I think you mentioned that. I think it was a one warning in the entire match, and that's something that I would definitely be looking to. Yeah, I'd be looking to definitely to squeeze a little bit more space there if I was the bigger guy, and to, because the minute you can squeeze the space, he has to react somehow. He's not going to just go to the ring all the time. So then you're flipping the tide in a way, and you're getting Axel or the shorter guy to maybe commit to something, and that can be where you can pick up some of your points.
You mentioned their fanboying over Zach. I think we're definitely guilty of fanboying over warnings on this show.
Yeah. There's something about that. It's just something that we've kind of put too much time and effort into fixing in Ireland. I think it was when the scoreboards came in, we just kind of went, you know what, these things are pretty important. They're spinning or they're flipping a lot of matches for us, and we need to pay better attention to them. And once you've focused on them, you can't not see them anymore. It's like they're just there.
That was a spoiler alert, by the way. We have that coming up as well.
We have that coming up, but you know what? It's one of those. That clip I quite like because it's a topic that keeps coming back at us, and that people keep requesting is the little versus large. How do you fight a taller opponent? And we flipped it on its head later as well, and we went, well, how do you fight a smaller opponent? Because that comes up in team sparring, and it can be quite a challenge if you're not used to it. But I guess most people feel like the challenge is fighting the bigger one. And I think we've all experienced sparring someone bigger than us. There's always a bigger fish out there. So Axel was kind enough to lend a few suggestions there. And the principle, of course, was, we often talk about, pulling your partner or your opponent around the place and waiting for an opportunity. And that was Axel using his front leg and staying busy with the front leg. So slightly different.
We've seen it as well in a later one with Stephen Ryan in 2010 with Mitja from Slovenia.
Mitja,
yeah, a very similar idea, and he did a fantastic job as well. So it's just when you're that guy who's considered a smaller guy, you can't give up that front leg.
I like it. Consider the small guys. Being small is a state of mind. We can change it. It would say that one to Jamie as well. It's like you can just keep growing if you want. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So the next bit that we had was recognizing patterns, and
he's just trying to pick that opportunity to go through, and it's nice. And even that axe kick there is quite nice as well. He's finding the timing really, really well, but not getting much of a return. Maybe the shot selection could be a little bit better, but yeah, the timing of it is quite good on his part.
And it was just one of those things where, if there's a little bit more of a breath and a little bit more of a thinking what's going on here, then both competitors have a chance to capitalize on this, where you look at almost work there for Camille just at the very, very end, where he's thrown the side kick in long, he's landed in close, and from there he has the potential for the retreating side kick or a back kick on his way back out, so particularly after you've been caught once, well, then maybe you can use that to invite the same response again, and you're ready for it the second time. You can capitalize on it and go back.
Yeah, you could definitely try suck him in there and almost set a trap with it, because it's kind of like a trend in this match of a long, deep side kick to initiate everything that starts off. It's almost every single sequence in the match, to be honest. First round and second round, it starts off with a deep side kick.
One will carry the front leg.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely something that one of them could have been able to capitalize, but didn't really pick up on it too much.
I'd forgotten about that one. That was one that had kind of just slipped my mind. That had drifted, but that was Dobrovolsky, wasn't it, from on the polar side, getting quite caught out there in Ireland in the World Championships. So again, the theme on that one.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I actually liked that clip was because we'll see it later, but the whole idea of the really high level guys who are able to adapt within the 2 minutes, it's a really, really special skill, and not many people can do it because it's such a short time. You're in the moment. It's very difficult. But then on the flip side of that, if you can recognize patterns and know that your opponent might do that again, that might be something very valuable for you. So I thought it was just an interesting clip because we might have a contrasting one coming up as well later.
Sure.
And also something that I really liked was this whole idea of patient intensity. That sometimes like people really, really force it and they're just trying so hard that they almost rush their shots and like maybe lose balance and falling into things a little bit, and just having that like small bit of patience while still having the intensity. A bit of a contradiction, I know, but if you can get that right, I think it just makes things a little bit clearer in terms of your shots, and it's particularly getting clear scores. So yeah, I just liked two of those things that we brought up there in that clip.
Very cool. We kind of go from there again back to maybe a little bit of a reference to our value of scores and our warnings and the game state. And the game state is something again that we discuss over and over and over again. And it's so relevant that, you know, people need to know where they are and act and adapt accordingly. So this is our first clip that looks at knowing the game state, and you picked the tagline for this one: "Winning is winning," and I quite like that one. So let's have a little.
It's like that. What's that one in Fast and Furious? The movie says, it doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning is winning.
Winning is winning.
And I think that's very relevant here. Yeah.
Here we go.
It's interesting to note that there's a difference between 4-0 and being 4 points behind. Like
Yes.
for example, because you might be 4-0 down,
And a point
but it
to
might
lose.
it might be only 1 point on each score. So like there is a big difference between 4-0 down versus being 4 points behind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think in the first round there, Ian was it like 3 points, 4 points behind on 2 cards, and there was like 1 score on the other ones. So like he could have easily easily pulled back 2 of those cards early on in the second round, and it could have been a completely different match, because who knows how both fighters would have adjusted and reacted if it was 2-2.
I often find that it's an interesting situation that you end up in where, you know, when you go back into a match and the goal is, okay, listen, you're fighting for round 3 here, because if you 2 cards are gone, but if you bring back these other 2 cards, you're ready to go. Now, mentally, your fighter's gone in there planning to fight 2 more rounds. Their job is to bring it to 2-2, and when the hands come up in the middle at the end of that round, they're back in. They were ready to fight round 3, whereas the other person has come in there mentally with a 4-0 lead. They're looking to hold on to that 4-0 lead. They're expecting to finish the match in 2 minutes. And mentally, what it can do to you is the person who's now got the momentum, because they've pulled back, they've gotten those 2 cards, they're into the 3rd round already expecting to fight a 3rd round. And that mentally can be all it takes to carry you through, you know, the rest of the way. So, you know, I think it's a very interesting concept, because if you think about it, the people who are competing in team sparring quite often will probably have this idea ingrained in them. Like, this is one of the things that I noticed because of team sparring quite often. But if you don't team spar that much, it's probably not something that you even think of or consider. You know what I mean? Because you're not really fighting for flags and individual scores, so individual corner judges, we say. Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing that some people may not notice. But like, you don't need to win 4-0 or 3-0 in every single match. You know, if you can win 2-1, that's all you need.
We'll take it.
A win is a win.
We'll take it. A win is a win.
Yeah, I love that idea that you came up with there, of the whole thing of maybe preparing for the next 3rd round. And it's something that we've talked about, of not getting ahead of yourself and being in the moment, because we don't want that concept of mental performance and choking. We talked about that in depth with Ursha in particular.
Yeah.
But but that is very, very interesting, the whole idea of like where your mental state is, because you have that advantage then for the 3rd round, and it just really swings the tide and takes the momentum away from the person who was initially leading. And it's just that importance of knowing the game state, knowing the board, and you need that connection and communication with your coach as well, whether you're 4-0 up or whatever, or whether you're just fighting for 2 cards.
And I think it's just one of the concepts that we don't talk enough about, or we haven't traditionally talked enough about, is the concept of momentum and how it affects you. And I think a reason for that is we didn't know about the game state for certain up until the scoreboards. So you didn't really know if you were losing in a close match, or if you were ahead, or if a warning made a difference, or if that foul mattered, or if that shot actually landed. And so you're operating in a kind of like a parallel mindset, where you're not actually as impacted by what's happening in the match, or you're impacted by things that don't necessarily affect the scoreboard. You know, you're angry because you got caught out with something, but maybe the judge didn't see it and there was no score given, or your great plan didn't work, or you didn't connect the combination, or whatever it happens to be, and it's getting to you, but it could be completely irrelevant. You're thinking you're doing really well, but you've actually conceded 6 warnings, and those are we just weren't thinking about it until we could see it, and once we could see it, then we could employ strategies that other sports people use in a whole range of other sports where obviously the score is known, to build and leverage momentum and to make that be something that gets into someone else's head and to use that in our favour. So I think that's
and there's some fighters now are using that really, really well. It's actually like a stalwart in their game, like, you know, and it's how they go about it. It's like a foundation thing that, right, I've this box kind of almost ticked, and I build from there. It is an advantage going in for sure. It's like, but it's that idea of momentum you said kind of reminds me of like video games. You know, you get the power plays, and you get like Tekken where you get a couple of shots in a row. Yeah, and it's like a multiplier as such. You know, that's a common feature in video games. But it's very much true. Like, that whole idea of momentum is very, very important.
And it's a great premise for us to start some constraints-based games and things like that on later. So we'll leave that for its time. But our next one is looking from kind of the middle of our series, episode 15, and having a solid foundation to go to the well with. So we'll jump into that one.
Earlier, really though, with the whole idea of having like that pyramid type of an idea of that, having that broad foundation that 90% of your game is going to come from that, and then as you go up, it just gets more narrow as you adapt and adjust to the situations at hand. And I think that's something that Sylvia is very, very good at. She has that big solid base where she has that distance management and things like this, and then she adjusts to the play. But not only that as well, if you can go with that style, think about this from 2015, 16, 17, there's been a lot of high level matches where she's been even further developing that style, and further practicing that style. So when it comes to a higher level, then again she's able to bring that out because she's done it more. Whereas if you have to adapt and have a different style for every single opponent, you're actually not getting the reps in as such there, because you're doing it different all the time. So you can only prepare for each style based on time a certain amount. So I think that's a massive strength in itself, of having that big broad foundation and just becoming more narrow as you go up, as you need to adapt.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that works for and against Katie. I think and you'd always say Katie can be very exciting to watch because she can pull any shot out, but fundamentally I think where it becomes a challenge for someone who's adaptable like that is when you have a pressure point around a decision. So the game state rapidly changes. You have a momentum swings. You go from being ahead to being behind. You go from being level to conceding a warning. Now you're behind. Or even you get to the position where you have 20 seconds to go and you're in the lead. Those create pressures that, if you're absolutely anchored in what you've always done and you've been in that position many, many times before, you kind of more naturally and more quickly, you have a motor pattern for those, or you have a pattern or some chunking for those decisions because you've been there before and you've made the decisions before and you have some feedback. But when it's new to you, you've put yourself in that position because you've been doing something new or different, or that you've been training less frequently, it's a challenge because now the decision is coming in, and you haven't really prepared for that. You haven't been in that exact situation before. So
when the pressure, as the pressure comes on, we naturally revert to what we always do anyway. So we naturally revert to what we know best and how we usually act. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to be said for just having that solid foundation that you can go to at all times, having that go-to where you have that base and you have the confidence in knowing that you're solid in that area.
Going back to the well.
Yeah, that was a good one. One of the things I noticed there as well is we probably haven't had much sun in Ireland for a while. We both looked a bit more tanned.
Do you know what?
Slightly, by the way.
Slightly, yeah. And there is a thing where, like, I had to start bringing in the lights and all the rest of it. We started this off in the spring, and we had nice sunshine in the mornings. We had a summer where there was sporadic sunshine. We got a little bit of it every now and again, and then from September now has just been like an absolute, like tunnel into darkness, and this morning was the first time where I was like, no amount of light is going to do this. We've got to, you know, improve the situation, bring in all the unnatural light in the world, and like make ourselves visible. But yeah, it's a challenge. So we're starting to kind of cross over now, and the next bit that I have is looking at the blitz and looking at setting up, throwing the blitz, and the kind of few little factors that get into it. And we've really looked at this one just because it became such a factor for a few years there, and now it's just another tool that some will use and some won't. Yeah. But for a while there, it kind of became, look, if you've got to pay some attention to this. So let's see.
It there at the start, and that's a great point, because it's not something you just come out with all of a sudden. It's something that you kind of need to set up throughout the match.
Yeah.
That you need to be always testing in that range, in out, like that push pull that we talked about earlier, and that sets it up for when you need to use it and when the opportunity arises. It's not something that you can just all of a sudden use. You need to be setting up that rhythm the whole time in order to break that rhythm.
And something that particularly we say Colin might be a little bit of an exception here, but when you're looking at Vitaly and when you're looking at Anis, most of the work is being done throughout the match with the front leg, and the rhythms that are set are about controlling space and controlling distance with the front leg, and that sets the kind of the opponent's mind onto, okay, I'm watching for this leg, I'm watching for a different threat. And so very occasionally dropping the blitz in there means, because you haven't been preparing for it, you haven't seen it too much in the match, when you do throw it, if it's the right moment, it's really, really hard to stop. And then the flip side of it, then, when you have someone like Culm who uses it extensively, you know it's coming, but the rhythm controlling, that's needed then is exceptional. But it's, knowing that it's coming doesn't mean you know when it's.
See it there at the start.
Yeah, I think what I was saying at the end there is, knowing that it is coming doesn't mean you know when it's coming. And again, I think especially what we were saying around Anis and Vitaly in that clip, I think that's the one that's staying very relevant as we came into 2020. Now, who knows what's relevant now as we go into 2021, but was that idea of a lot of the guys who are blitzing well are controlling the distance and tempo with their front leg more so, and including the blitz a bit more sporadically, a bit more unexpectedly maybe. And there aren't many who are of the mould of Cullen Carroll who can use it as their primary scoring tool. But
then again, it goes back to that idea that we spoke about earlier, which actually featured Collie as well, that whole idea of distance and timing. Like they're two of the most important principles in any combat sport for me.
Yeah. Just
getting the timing correct and getting the distance correct, and anybody who can couple the two of those well, they can do anything that they want to do. And the shots really aren't as relevant, because if you can make the correct decisions there on when to go, and from the distance being adjusted to act accordingly on that, it makes a massive difference.
Sure. So we're going to jump over and look at hands and back kick, and a little bit of interaction there that comes from our episode 17. And I would tend to refer to this as an exit strategy. The combination is done. She's got her scores. She has her back to the center of the ring. And this is a great opportunity to just put a final statement or a full stop on it. Give the judges a bit of time to push the button. And she's not conceding anything. She had the center of the ring. She had pole position anyway. So it really just does put kind of like a nice, clear, full stop at the end of a combination.
Yeah, and this is naturally this kick is naturally like a space creator as such as well. So you can see there, as she lands that kick, it just creates that gap between them. So as you said, the fact that she's on the opponent's side of the ring, we'll say it gives her plenty of space to move back into the center. Where often we'll see this, because it's under retreat, usually we'll see it more towards the edges, and people may give away warnings, or they may even land the kick but end up landing outside of the ring, and they won't get the score for it. So it's always good to have that nice bit of leeway behind you there, having some extra space. And again, we can see, as we mentioned earlier as well, that it's quite common to come off a punching sequence, just like this one here again. So when somebody is punching, this technique is always in play.
Yeah. Two sweet Ukrainian examples of a back kick there.
Yeah. I found myself nodding along there to the points as I was listening to him. I was like, yeah, these guys got good points. But yeah, definitely the back kick is there always as an exit strategy, and that idea of having it when you're attacking as an exit strategy, the open space for a clear score was a good point as well. But yeah, whenever the hands are in play, the back kick is in play, and I think that that's a very important concept, and people probably generally in ITF, I think probably don't make the most of that. The Ukrainians are very very good at it, and a few others, but generally I don't think it's something that's used as well as it could be.
Yeah, and I suppose it's the idea of just separating it out in your head because it's typically seen as a counter. It doesn't have to be, and you can attack on the way back. Is the other thing. So yeah, I would, as we said there, I tend to refer to it as an exit strategy, but it's it's still an attacking shot, even if we're moving backwards, because you had the intent. You were the one who was who initiated it. So yeah, it's an impressive one. And jumping from there, we're looking at the back leg downward kick or the back leg axe kick, and we had a little bit of fun in one of our episodes going back through a long way through the records and wondering why is it that this shot it just isn't seen so much. So this was the clip. And I know this is this can come across as, look, this is a highlight reel, okay, in a way this is showcasing axe kick, but genuinely in terms of looking at the fights that these clips came from and at other fights that we could have chosen as well, it's incredible how rarely that back leg downward kick is countered, or that a counter is even attempted, because and when you think about that, how often does someone attempt to counter a side kick, a turning kick or a blitz or something like that, and there's going to be a fairly high number of attempted counters. But when you're thinking that you're exposing yourself, you're moving from that back leg through, you're picking up that big leg. But for the people who have the confidence, the range, and the tactical appreciation of the skill to throw it, it's not something that often gets countered. And because of that, it can be a much safer shot to throw than a person will feel when they train with it.
Yeah, I think that's twofold as well. I think number one is because it's not very a common technique at the moment in particular. Yeah. So as a result, people aren't really cued into it and accustomed to it. So, and then because of that, as you said earlier, the fact that once that kick gets started, and if you haven't made up your mind to counter it, then you're too late. Your timing is going to be incorrect. So and
I love that. For me, if people are dropping the axe on people's heads, it's a great day. This is fantastic to watch. And I still stand over that. See it. It's so rare that people will actually attempt to counter it. That it's so rare that someone is good at this kick or has the confidence to really express themselves with this kick, that it's easier to just go, that's something big, I move over here. And if you have that in your toolbox and you can use it and you have confidence around it, it's just such an interesting shot to be able to pull out of the bag.
What actually reminded me of is the point that you made earlier with Lindsay in terms of the shot selection she made as she was pushing Adelina towards the corner, picking shots that were very hard for Adelina to step into. And it actually reminded me of that as well. And it's probably something that Lindsay does as well, that back leg axe kick.
But she does, yeah, for sure.
Very, very interesting, that point that it's not really countered so much. But I guess generally in terms of the axe kick, we would see the front leg a bit more these days, coming off a side kick chamber into an axe kick, or the hacks kick as it's called. But that back leg one is very, very dangerous. And as you said, if you can add that into your toolbox, it's definitely something that's of value for you.
Yeah, so I suppose the takeaway from that is, everything goes in cycles. If it worked before, it'll probably work again. It's just finding the new application, the new rhythm, the new distance, whatever it happens to be. So our next clip was when we went and had a little bit of a look at team sparring. So we were able to grab a little bit of footage from the 2019 World Championships in Germany. So let's have a look at this one.
Team sparring bout, so it's very important. Traditionally, when the rules were first to 3 wins got the team sparring bout as got a victory for their team. Traditionally then you would favour maybe sending out the opponent's side to come first, where you can adjust on the fly then and maybe mismatch based on that. But now, based on the new rules where we have 5 bouts guaranteed, it actually swings it around the opposite way, that if you send out first, you actually get to control the fourth and fifth bout, which become very, very crucial in this new setup. So obviously, if you win the toss and you send first, so you send first, then they send, you send, then they send again. So that's how it works. So it goes back and forth like that. So
Yeah.
if you're able to send out that first match, you actually really get to choose three bouts as such, where you have at least a little bit more of control in that. So that's quite important on that front.
Obviously you need the depth in the team to make that, you know, worthwhile as a choice, because if you have a fighter you really don't want to put out or something like that, then it makes it different. And then also, if you genuinely have a 6-man team or 6-woman team where you don't actually know, you know, it'll be based on the matchups that come up, then sometimes it really you don't have as much power in that match 4, match 5. Because if you're playing into a team that has a strong 6, you're not sure about match 5 when you pick your match 4.
Definitely.
So I think it's one of those things.
It only really comes into play really if you can kind of have an idea of who are going to be the last 2 guys sent.
Yeah.
So usually, yeah, as you said, if somebody has they're carrying one weaker fighter who usually doesn't get sent out and is genuinely a reserve,
yeah,
then that's where it's a little bit more of a different situation.
Nice deep meta-analysis of team sparring, send-outs and fight orders and all of that. And wow, it's a real subset of coaching skill that most people don't get to practice.
Yeah, true. You know? It's it's only really at the high level. And at that, it's usually countries won't have the depth to have lots of teams generally. So it's usually probably the top coach that will coach all the teams for most countries as well. So it's not something everybody gets to experience. But just something that I noticed there as well is the level of the juniors. It just shows the evolution of ITF sport sparring as well. Because like when I look back there when I was a junior, those guys in those clips, that they're head and shoulders above the level that we would have been at, you know. So it's good to see that the ITF as a whole is just evolving and pushing
Leveling
forward.
Up. Yeah, I think it's definitely evident there, and I think maybe one for the new year as well. We might see if we can get more footage of, you know, full team sparring contests and have another look at the match order and the selections, because it really is interesting. And as we were saying, there, it completely changes depending on whether you feel that the other team you have a full 5 or 6, they have a full 5 or 6. Have they got preferences? Do they have key players? Is there someone who has to be sent out first? Or, you know, all those kind of things play into it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it actually reminds me of a very funny story. When we were against Ukraine one year we're in Budapest, and Adam Shelley, obviously multiple-time world champion, was on our team, but he was carrying an injury.
Yeah.
So he was our 6th guy. But we were fighting Ukraine, and obviously they have
European Cup,
Ivan,
was it?
European Cup, that was the one, yeah. So they had Ivan in Ukraine, who was very high level as well. So they had Ivan pipped to match up to Adam.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is I was the last match. I was match 5, so I was expecting Ivan to come out. And he didn't come out, and we were like, what's going on here? But what happened is they got so caught up on the matchups that they forgot that there was only 5 matches, and they ended up never sending out Ivan. But we were never sending Adam because he was carrying an injury from the individual. So it's funny how that works.
That's amazing, and that kind of stuff does happen. You get everything has to happen so fast. You can get caught in the emotion of the moment and the excitement and everything, and it's a tough skill to delegate all of the information processing and get it done. So it's definitely something. So we're going to have a look at a nice little shot from Davide Massaneo that we had a look at, and a lovely skill that he has in terms of his ability to hide his back leg while he goes to hands, and he gets some damage on it. So here's what we've got.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, that's actually, it's a very advanced technique from Davide, because usually if Carl was against anybody else in this left versus right stance, he would get away with that, because usually when you're, for Davide attacking, he's going to be very much side facing as he comes through because of the stance difference. But you can see his front foot is sideways here now, but as he attacks, see the change of that little quick step to change the direction of his front foot, which opens up his body for him to get him directly forwards. So I think if that was in the opposite stance and somebody who wasn't as advanced, I think that Carl actually would have ended up being on top from that sequence. But Davide was just very, very good at this shot, and he was able to understand the body mechanics that is necessary to get this off, and then able to blindly hide that back leg turning kick to the head for a nice visible three.
A very nice visible 3-pointer, and a lovely lean on it, like from going into that blitz, and the lean that he takes to be able to put the foot on the head from there. It's quite a nice shot. And I said,
really enjoyed that episode. It was a high level contest between both guys, back and forth.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Just the mental aspect of it all as well was very interesting. You see it there, Davide coming back in after landing that 3 points. A lot of time people would settle, and he goes back in right away with the hands again. You know, it was just the mental strength of both guys there, and that one as well was great to see.
Huge opportunity to build momentum, and then as you said, you know, even when like the shot had been countered very, very well, like that blitz early on in the match, Carl had slipped the head beautifully and landed him with a cracking backhand. So to be able to go back to that shot when it was needed, you know, and have the confidence to do it when it hadn't worked, there was a lot of mental gains in that one. But yeah, great episode, I think. We're going to have a look now at one of the topics quite relevant to that. So adjusting the stance and adjusting your facing to be able to punch more effectively. So we have one pick from episode 21. So we'll have a look at that. And she adjusts her stance when she's absolutely sure she's going to hands. So when she's going directly to hands, we can often see that little bit of an opening out of the stance. The hands are coming up into more of a classic boxing guard. And then we're changing. So just to have a look at one or two of those again. Where you can see the change in guard, and in she goes, and it does change things quite a bit for her. Whereas when she's in her more normal flow, she's a little bit more side facing. She's going to be, the hands are carried a little bit lower and looser, and the hands are a follow on, they're a continuation following the kicks in. And I suppose that's her more normal stance, but then she transitions very well when she gets onto the inside, and she's looking to get to stay in contact. And that's one of the key differences I think we're going to see across all of the fighters, is that you can be on the inside and spend some time there in Waco, and the referee isn't going to break you apart unless you can't naturally work your way out on your own. So a little more of Katja.
Yeah, but that was great episode as well, actually, because that was, I think, one of our most viewed ever. People really enjoyed that contrast of ITF versus Waco. But that idea of being able to adjust the front foot from side facing to half/full facing to get the hands off is massive, and it's something that I really, really focus on at the moment. Well, at the moment, I suppose, but over like the last year, really, with some of my younger guys, when they're just developing their stance and just having that understanding of you need to adjust between side and half facing. And it's time and time again, we've seen it that the high level guys that that we look at, they are really good at adjusting that on the fly and getting the hands off and coming back to that side facing again when necessary, to really maximize the kicking that we have in ITF and to maximize the use of hands as well.
Super. The next one we have actually is looking at the environment and how the experience has changed by having the scoreboard. So this is again jumping on to episode 23. Let's have a little look. And I do wonder, is that it's not on the scoreboard. It's not there shining out at you. You don't have a coach reading to you in clear terms that you're 5 points down. You have a job to do here. And, and I think maybe it was with the introduction of the scoreboards later that the concept of momentum became more clear. The impact of a warning became very real because you could see the scoreboard change. Where, when you're in the fight, I don't remember experiencing it the same way when I was sparring in fight nights and whatever, as going to the Viking Cup and seeing it on the screen in front of me. At the time it was the glowing neon lights rather than the TV screen, but like seeing where you are in the
present
match,
I think.
I think momentum jumps out at you then. And I think here we can see kind of a transitional era where the clear scores are obvious, especially when you have Neil celebrating them, but the clear scores are super obvious, and both sides are willing to acknowledge that and let it be, rather than capitalizing on the change of momentum. Like, so can we score? Can we push you out as well?
Yeah.
Because I want more out of this. I'm not going to give up ring space. I fought to get that ring space. I'm not going to back up 4 or 5 steps when I just put you on the edge of the ring. And I don't think the value of the warning is as appreciated in this time. There's that damn warning again.
Yeah, we've got some common trends.
Yeah. But again, I think that was a huge transitional period for ITF, and I think for us as an episode, that was a chance to kind of comment on some of the things that people have like nostalgia about. They, a memory about, a fight that didn't have a scoreboard where both guys just went toe to toe until the very end, versus the environment where you're consciously aware of the score and can do something about it all the way through the match until the very end as well. And there are, advocates for and against. But I have to say, from a sports perspective or from a sports coaching perspective, I'm a big fan of the scoreboard.
Yeah, and I made it a bit more kind of like, well, not point sparring, but closer to point sparring as well without the board, because we seen there the celebrating of scores and almost giving the judges the opportunity to write them down and things like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just, the most important thing for me there is the environment. I mean, like, even like when we're talking about ITF and WACO, they're very, very similar. But the subtle changes in the environment and the rule set and things like the scoreboard, things that are not allowed, make a massive difference. And I think that's very important when you bring that back to training, because a lot of people, they don't train the same way as when we compete.
Yeah,
and you brought it up there, and that was what kind of like sparked the idea for me when I was looking through these episodes of the fight night versus the championships feel. And it's just like trying to replicate that same way you're going to compete in your training is very, very important. And that was one of the kind of takeaways for me there on that one.
For sure. So we went for a little bit of a sideline trip then after that, and we went to have a look at the difference between ITF and WT. And one of the things that we took out of that was a little bit of a look at the range of things they can do with their front leg and some of the front leg shots in particular. So here's my short selection out of that one.
But look at this guy here with the axe kick. I mean, we did a video recently on axe kick. It's such a clear shot. Yeah. And I think that a couple of guys you mentioned there earlier of having that really good front leg, it's something that has really come into ITF off the front leg a bit more recently. I think that ability to go from a half-facing axe, we see here, is a bit more full-facing. But again, that's a big feature of any of the elite guys we've seen in all these analysis videos, that they're seamlessly able to transition between different facing stances and body types, body facing, I guess, full facing, half facing, all of that, to be able to pull out a range of shots. They're not really stuck in any one particular style. And you see it here, he goes full facing and it's clear as day. Nice headshot there, I think it's.
So again, hugely different in some ways from what we do, and yet hugely applicable. Like we were looking at, what the flexibility and the different distance allows, and just taking the hands away as a constraint, if we want to look at it that way, what it changes, about what you can do with the front leg. And it's there were some really interesting takeaways from that one. And we had a good few commenters who were more familiar with WT, who were, correcting some of our points and so on, which is always welcome. Enhance our own education of it as well. But, for us as an episode and looking at how the balance, the flexibility, the body positioning was really allowing a huge range of shots off that front leg. And certainly something to play with,
But I think as well, something that's like, that pops up there is that whole idea of the principles that we're trying to put forward, because although it's different, the similar kind of ideas are popping up again and again and again. And I think that is the value in having principles and having this kind of a context when you're trying to understand the game more. Because you notice that these things will keep popping up again. And if they're the things that you can be really solid in, it's massive.
For sure. So this is, again, our next step in episode 26 takes us onto a particular principle, and that of forcing the direct line so that you can have continuation, build momentum, and add scores. Back onto that particular one, you can have matches go for a particular period of time without any major scoring until you can force someone onto the direct line or deny them movement. And this is the 56 senior female, I should say. And you can see the work that's done to put the person in a particular line of movement, so to get them moving in a particular way, so that you can predict where they'll be. You can open up, and typically you just need them moving towards you or away from you in a straight line, as you open up your shots, or of course you pin them on the edge of the ring. So either one will do. But both Jenny and Mira in this clip, do a very good job of making that happen. And I think it's interesting as well, because we were just talking about that point in terms of the exit. You can see Jenny gets here, but the hands have stopped, and it's like, okay, now we have the back kick can come out
it's a good
there.
example of it.
Yeah, and then from Mira's point of view, it's like, okay, she managed to force the the distance so much in that straight line, it took away Jenny's shot. So I do think that's one of the things that you'll see, particularly in the lightweights, that there is one to three punches, and then generally speaking, there's an opportunity to build a score, and the punches create the space, but then the kicks are always the big obvious score. Back onto that particular one,
you were having an awful time there with the light.
Oh yeah, and it was almost happening this episode as well. As the episode goes on, the sun moves through the sky, comes through a different window. It's like got caught. Yeah. But I have to say, I love that as a simple principle, where every drill we've ever done as a kid works if the other person goes back in a straight line. And it's such a simple principle of like, don't get caught in that straight line, catch your opponent on that straight line.
But one of the most important things about that as well is the getting the transition, like through the gulf, we say, of transitioning from that distance in to get the momentum going forward. And that's where a lot of people mess up. They just attack from anywhere without kind of setting it up. And that's one of the things that I just noticed there, of like the likes of Jenny and people like that. They're able to like use their timing and their distance to transition through the ranges, from that longer range into mid range into short range. And then once they're in range, then they have the momentum, and then it's a solid get go for them. But that's the important part as well, of being able to transition through them safely, not just aimlessly walking into range and getting picked off, so.
Yeah, and they have go-to combinations or sequences, whether it's a shift and a front leg movement, or it's a shift, a pull, a go to hands, and they've got a few go-to things that help to get them across that initial distance and force a reaction, force a movement. And it's just, you can see whether it was from Jenny or from Mira, or you could see really effective use of what happens when you do get pinned on that straight line, and that's when it all opens up. And the next clip is really where we just went like head first into principles, and we needed diagrams and everything to go through this one. So this is all about adding resistance through constraints. It's here on the goal side of it. We're basically looking to do a few different things when we set up a scenario like this. And we call them scenarios, we call them engagements, we call them many things. The simplest word is a game. But what we're trying to do from the get-go is provide people with variable challenges, so that because both people have an objective, you're never going to be encouraged to solve the problem the same way each and every time. You're going to have to adjust microscopically tiny little details of your movement in order to find an appropriate solution every time. And that leads us through this journey of destabilizing the solution, because it's always changing, encouraging the people to explore and find their own solutions, and to self-organize. So that's where the task and the constraints of the task lead themselves to a solution and a self-organization of the learner. Then we're looking to, as coaches, amplify the information and invite affordances, and that basically means make it more obvious that there should be an action or an interaction, make it easier to perceive the opportunity to take action. And then also playing on the cognitive side of it, we're going to provide feedback where we're going to allow people to maybe understand a little bit more what the situation is that's emerging, how it relates tactically, and so on. And yeah, that was one where it's hard to pull a summary out of that episode. I'm just saying, like, watch that episode. I really enjoyed, banging that one out. And like, it was a huge amount of, it is what we do every day, except for the last 9 months. So I mean, it was a huge one for me.
I think it was like we should have called this duo probably the scientist and the layman. Maybe it was like getting out that science jargon and just trying to break it down into what it means for people who are training. And because like this is very like theory heavy at a base level, but then the principles that we were able to take away from it, I think, were very valuable, and we got a lot of messages from people who were really got interested in this, and they started to read up on it themselves and things like that. So yeah, this was one of those episodes that people really got value from if they're interested in this type of
I think
training.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, that's the one where if you want myself and Richie to go off on an absolute rant, have a chat with us about that stuff and we'll have a great time.
Yeah.
But we then went, we had a little bit of a look at some Q&A sessions over the last little while. As an awful lot of people, especially locally in Ireland, were shut down from training again. So we went into some of the Q&A stuff, and one of the questions that jumped out at me from this one was about the time that we spend actually training for sparring versus the time we spend in supplementary training. So the question was from Tila Melly. How much time should be spent on sparring training versus supplemental training, i.e. strength or cardio?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the straight up answer that I gave, just keep it simple, is supplement means to add on and support. So therefore it shouldn't be something that takes over your main training.
And the only thing I'd add to that is keeping in mind your training load in terms of the relative intensity of your training and on what days that it happens. So your body does need to recover as well. So if you have an hour and a half or an hour of a heavy sparring session and you're following it the next day with an explosive power workout or whatever, and then the next day is another sparring session, and then you've got sprint intervals or something like that the day after that, at some point your body is going, this is not, and the effectiveness drops off very rapidly. So just take into account a little bit the overall training load. And one of the things that most of us as Taekwondo people can do is, your Taekwondo training is probably more often than not structured around a club format, and you know what days you've got that. And so you know what days of the week you can supplement with, your strength training, or, what phases of the year. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is that you don't need to train sparring every week of the year. You don't need to train strength every week of the year. You don't need to do cardio every week of the year. And when you try to, it all fails. So give yourself a phase where each thing is maybe present, but one is more important than the other. And remember that when it's Taekwondo time and the tournaments are coming up, it's now just maintain your strength, maintain your your conditioning, and focus on the things that are going to win the match in the ring. I think that's... Yeah, so keep the supplementary training supplemental. I think that was the...
Yeah, definitely. That's it.
That's a question that keeps coming up, though. So obviously it does resonate with a lot of people of how much time to put onto each thing. So I think that... Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think as well that it's a whole idea of like the kind of reward you get from training. And sometimes like the numbers and the supplementary training in like the gym, for example, you see the weight on the bar going up and things like that. Where you're training in Taekwondo specifically, it's a bit more non-linear in terms of like it's not as straightforward. And I think that can throw people off, where they're not sure if they're improving, not sure if they're making the right steps forward. And I think that's why people naturally gravitate towards the numbers and the things that are a bit more black and white.
And data-driven fitness, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
But it's fantastic. Like, that's one of my favorite things about this, is being able to answer questions for people and throw out our 2 cents on some topics, because it's great to be able to have that for people to ask questions. And like when I was younger and when I was like learning, trying to research all these things myself, I would have loved to be able to throw these things out there and just get some in-depth answers. So exactly. So it's fantastic to be able to give that out for people and to give a bit back, I guess.
And the very last one we have was from our last episode, number 32, and this is looking at drills and the context of drills.
So important. And I think that's a great segue to talk about context.
Yeah.
Because you like, these are things that people put on social media, and because nowadays people are very active on social media, they put a lot of their drills and exercises on social media. Of course, they're not going to be putting stuff. They put things that are visually pleasing to people. Yeah. And all of this stuff is very visually appeasing, and it's something that you can scroll through, you'll watch, and it's enjoyable to watch. But like, when you become to the real representative stuff and live stuff, all of these top level ITF guys, they're doing their sparring training and their constrained spars and all of this stuff as well.
Yes.
But that's just not something that you share on social media, because it
doesn't look as good.
Not as exciting. It doesn't look as exciting. It's a bit messier. And so Of course, all of these top level guys in ITF, they know this.
Yeah.
But some people who are maybe not in the know-how and they don't understand the whole idea of skill acquisition so much, they think that this is the only way to train, and this is the answer to training. So I think this is a great segue to really talk about context is key here. And even looking at some of the exercises we have here, it's not just about technique per se. It's like, for example, this one is a great one.
Yeah.
This is also working on leg strength, which is a massive part of ITF Taekwondo training. And it's a very, very, very valuable asset to have, to be able to have strong legs to carry your kicks into positions. Whereas this technique is our drill, we say, is not just about sparring. Of course, the feet here, which is an important motor skill that's required. And that's very important. Like for this one, for example, maybe they're working on cardio and interval training. So I think the context is key.
Context is key. And I think that's a great way to finish that one.
Definitely. And I keep going back to this all the time. Like even there was a video on our TikTok page the other day of me doing an exercise like from a lunge into a side kick. So obviously like it's not something that you expect to do in a match, and then there's comments coming in like this will never work. Obviously because we're not working on this is not like meant to work.
The representative scale is on the it's flatlined. It's dead.
Yeah. It's just like but that's it. Like context is key. So you always have to ask yourself why. But just on that as well, I think look at everything that we just chatted through these episodes here of the things that we like to take away. Like these have been great takeaways here in this episode we looked at, and not many of them are specific like drilling kind of things. They're like things that are almost like subsets of the skills in terms of like the distance, the timing, and momentum, all these things. These are not really things that you can like drill. So like, you know what I mean? It just shows the importance of knowing how to train these things, and the context is so relevant. So the why is important here, not just the what, and that's so important.
Yeah, for me, I like just can't re-emphasize that enough. That's the part that kind of makes the most difference, because you know the more years you've been coaching and teaching, and the more years you've been competing, the content of the session changes regularly, but the concepts and the principles should stay more or less the same. So you adapt to the tactics, strategies, and the environment at the time, whatever the meta is, and then you change what you need to change, but the principles underlying it stay the same. The fighting is fighting, winning is winning, whatever way you want to look at it.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the end. That brings us to the end of our rollback, our reeling in the years of, or the months in our case, of Fight Chat Fridays, and brings us to the end of 2020. And you'd like to look forward and think 2021 will be a little bit more practical in terms of our ability to get out there, practice Taekwondo, compete. But not just yet. We're looking at another few months at least of more of the same.
Yeah, but look, it's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed these, and hopefully people have taken bits away. Like even for us, they've been enjoyable to do, and just almost kind of like have these discussions that we would naturally, and just share them with everybody else has been great. And like I said earlier, just being able to help other people that are at different stages in their journey with their Taekwondo or whatever. It's been fantastic. We've got lots of people sending in questions and sending messages every week that they're interested in asking more questions in depth. Super. And it's been fantastic. So just like to say thanks to everybody who's been following along thus far. It's been very enjoyable from our front.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Here's to another couple of episodes in 2021, hopefully.
2021. Well, folks, don't tune in next Friday. We'll be doing nothing. But if you do, remember to like this video, subscribe, hit the bell button. You will be notified when we get back up and running again in the new year. So from me, Adrian Byrne, and I'm sure from Richie, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.